There's a particular kind of exhaustion that has nothing to do with how much sleep you got last night. It lives deeper than your bones, settles into the spaces between your heartbeats, and whispers in the quiet moments when you think no one is watching. It's the exhaustion of living a life that isn't quite yours, wearing a face that almost fits, following a script that someone else wrote for your story. Gabor Maté once said something that cuts through all our carefully constructed defenses. The life you avoid living carries exactly the trauma you haven't yet had the courage to face. He wasn't talking about dramatic trauma, the kind that makes headlines or fills therapy sessions. He was talking about the quiet violence we do to ourselves every single day when we choose safety over truth, approval over authenticity, comfort over growth. You might be watching this video in the middle of another afternoon that feels like yesterday, in another week that blends into the last one, living another version of a life that seems to fit everyone else's idea of what your life should look like. And maybe, just maybe, there's something inside you that keeps whispering that this isn't it. This isn't the life you came here to live. But that whisper has become so familiar that you've learned to ignore it, the way you ignore the sound of traffic outside your window or the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Today, we're not going to ignore it anymore. We're going to listen to what that whisper has been trying to tell you all along. Because the life you're not living isn't just some abstract concept or motivational catchphrase. It's real. It's alive. And it's been waiting for you with the patience of someone who knows that eventually you'll have no choice but to come home to yourself. Something happens to your mornings when you're living someone else's life. You open your eyes, and instead of curiosity about what the day might bring, there's only the heavy knowledge of what you have to get through. Your alarm doesn't wake you up to possibility. It calls you to duty, to obligation, to another day of being who you're supposed to be instead of who you are. You've become so efficient at going through the motions that you barely notice you're not actually moving at all. You brush your teeth the same way, take the same route to work, have the same conversations with the same people about the same things that mattered yesterday and will matter tomorrow, but somehow never quite matter right now, in this moment, to the real you watching. It all happened from somewhere deep inside. There's this strange phenomenon that happens when you've been performing yourself for too long. People start complimenting the performance. You're so strong, they say. You're so reliable. You always have it together. And each compliment lands like a small stone in your chest because they're talking about someone you created to be loved. Someone you built to be acceptable. Someone who isn't quite you, but who does the job of being you so well that sometimes even you forget the difference. You feel guilty when you rest, as if your worth is measured only by what you produce, what you accomplish, how useful you are to other people's dreams and plans and expectations. Even your downtime feels stolen, borrowed from some cosmic debt you owe to productivity and purpose and all those shining ideals that look so good on social media but feel so empty in your actual chest, in your actual life, in the actual quiet. Moments when it's just you and the truth you're afraid to face. The body keeps the score, as they say, and your body has been keeping track of every day you've lived as someone else. It shows up as headaches that have no medical cause, as insomnia that doesn't respond to sleep hygiene, as a kind of bone-deep fatigue that rest doesn't touch. Your body is trying to tell you something that your mind has become too afraid to hear. You're not sick. You're not broken. You're just tired of pretending to be someone you're not. This isn't depression, though it might look like it from the outside. This isn't anxiety, though it might feel like it when you're lying awake at 3 a.m., wondering why you feel so disconnected from a life that looks so good on paper. This is what happens when you've been so busy being functional that you forgot to be real. This is what happens when surviving becomes so automatic that you forget what it feels like to actually live. There's a story that begins long before you were old enough to remember. In those first years when your survival depended entirely on being loved, being wanted, being good enough to keep. As a child, you learned to read the room with the precision of a translator, picking up on what made the adults in your life happy, what disappointed them, what earned you attention, and what got you ignored or criticized or worse thought you became. Student of other people's needs, because meeting those needs meant safety, meant belonging, meant not being abandoned to face the world alone. If your family valued achievement, you learned to achieve. If they needed you to be strong, you buried your tears so deep you forgot where you put them. If they wanted you to be agreeable, you smoothed down all your sharp edges until you couldn't find them anymore. Gabor Maté and Alice Miller have spent their careers documenting this phenomenon. This way the children adapt to their environment so completely that they lose touch with their own inner compass. What we call personality might really be just adaptation, just the clever ways a small person learned to survive in a world of bigger people who had their own unhealed wounds, their own unmet needs, their own ideas about how children should be. To make life easier, more manageable, more predictable, you became the good one, or the responsible one, or the strong one, not because that's who you naturally were, but because that's who you needed to be to keep the love coming, to keep the attention positive, to keep yourself safe in a world that felt uncertain and conditional. And you got so good at being that person that you forgot it was a role you were playing. You mistook the costume for your skin, the child you really were, the one who might have been loud or questioning or sensitive or wild, got locked away somewhere safe inside, waiting for a world that felt secure enough for them to come out and play. But that world never came, because you learned that the world only welcomed the adapted version, the one who had learned to be what others needed instead of what you were taught now. Decades later, you're still playing that same role, still reading the room, still trying to be what others need from you instead of discovering what you need from yourself. The child inside hasn't died, but they've been waiting so long that they've almost given up hope that you'll ever remember they exist, that you'll ever care enough about your own truth to let them breathe again. We live in an age of infinite possibility and infinite confusion, where every day brings new evidence of lives being lived better than yours, dreams being chased more boldly than yours, purposes being fulfilled more completely than yours. Social media has become a museum of other people's highlight reels, and you walk through it every day, comparing your behind the scenes, struggle with their carefully curated victories. The modern world sells you a story about choice, about how you can be anything, do anything, create any life you want if you just try hard enough, think positive enough, optimize yourself enough. But choice can become its own kind of prison when every option feels simultaneously possible and impossible. When the freedom to choose becomes the pressure to choose correctly, perfectly, in a way that will finally make you feel like you're living the right life instead of just living a life. You spend so much energy imagining the perfect version of your existence that you forget to actually exist. You plan and optimize and compare and adjust, always reaching for some future version of yourself who has it all figured out, who has made all the right choices, who finally feels the way you think you're supposed to feel about being alive. But that future self never arrives, because they're always just out of reach, always requiring one more achievement, one more change, one more perfect decision to become real. Instagram spirituality and productivity culture and the endless pursuit of purpose have created a new kind of performance, a new way to avoid the messy reality of being human. You follow morning routines and evening rituals. You journal and meditate and manifest. But sometimes, you wonder if you're just finding more sophisticated ways to avoid sitting with yourself as you actually are, not as you think you should be. The life you're not living might not be some grand adventure or perfect relationship or dream career. It might just be the life where you stop trying to live up to everyone else's definition of what a good life looks like and start paying attention to what actually makes you feel alive, even if it doesn't photograph well or fit into anyone's success story. There's a particular cruelty in the way human beings adapt to emotional pain. Your nervous system, in its wisdom, learns to protect you from feeling too much by helping you feel less of everything. What starts as a survival mechanism slowly becomes a way of life, until you're moving through your days wrapped in an invisible buffer that keeps the sharp edges of reality from cutting too deep, but also keeps the joy from reaching you with any real intensity. You develop what researchers call emotional numbing, a kind of protective distance from your own experience that feels like safety, but looks like depression, feels like wisdom, but functions like disconnection. You learn to expect less from your relationships, from your work, from your dreams, because expecting less hurts less when those expectations are met. The dangerous thing about emotional numbness is how normal it feels once you've been living in it for a while. You forget that there was ever a time when music could move you to tears, when a beautiful sunset could stop you in your tracks, when the possibility of connection with another person could make your heart race with hope and terror. You start to believe that the muted version of life you're experiencing is just how life is for adults, for responsible people, for anyone who's learned to be realistic about what's possible. Your brain, in its infinite adaptability, rewires itself around this diminished experience until what once felt like suffering now feels like normal. The Sunday night dread becomes just part of the rhythm of your week. The sense of going through the motions becomes your definition of maturity. The feeling of watching your life happen from the outside becomes so familiar that you stop noticing. You're doing it, but every once in a while, something breaks through. A song, a conversation, a moment of unexpected beauty or connection. And for just a few seconds, you remember what it felt like to be fully alive, fully present, fully yourself. These moments aren't nostalgic, they're revolutionary. They're your soul's way of reminding you that the numbness isn't permanent, that the real you is still in there, still capable of feeling everything you've learned to protect yourself from. Feeling that the question isn't whether you're living the life you want. The question is whether you can still feel the difference between existing and being alive, between going through the motions and actually moving, between surviving another day and welcoming whatever that day might bring. In the depth psychology that Carl Jung pioneered, there's a technique called active imagination, a way of dialoguing with the parts of yourself that have been exiled, ignored, or forgotten. Tonight, after you finish watching this video, I want you to try something that might feel strange at first, but to change everything about how you see your own life. Take out a piece of paper and a pen. Not your phone, not your laptop. Something that connects your hand to your heart without the interference of screens and keyboards. And I want you to write a letter, but not from the you that everyone knows. Not from the responsible, functional, adapted version of yourself. I want you to write from the part of you that got left behind somewhere along the way. This is the part that might have loved to paint, but was told that art wasn't practical. The part that wanted to travel, but was convinced that security mattered more than adventure. The part that felt things deeply, but learned that sensitive people don't survive in the real world. The part that had wild dreams, but was taught to be realistic, to settle, to choose what was safe over what was true. Let this part of you speak without censoring, without editing, without worrying about whether what they have to say is fair or kind or reasonable. They might be angry. They might be hurt. They might be tired of being ignored for so long that they've almost forgotten how to use their voice. But they remember everything you've given up, everything you've compromised, every time you've chosen being accepted over being real. The letter might say things like, "You abandoned me when I needed you most. You traded my dreams for other people's approval. You silenced my voice so their voices could be louder. I've been waiting here in the dark while you live someone else's life, and I'm tired of waiting. Or it might say, I understand why you did what you did. You were scared, but I'm still here, and I still have things to show you, places to take you, ways of being that you've forgotten, but that I remember. After you've let this voice speak, right back from where you are now. Don't defend your choices. Don't explain why you had to do what you did. Just listen. Just acknowledge. Just say hello to the part of yourself that's been carrying your unlived life all these years, waiting for you to remember that they exist. This isn't therapy, though it might feel therapeutic. This isn't fantasy, though it might feel fantastical. This is archaeology of the soul, a way of excavating the parts of yourself that got buried under other people's expectations and your own fears, but that are still alive, still breathing, still hoping that someday you'll come back for them. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote about something he called the courage to become who you are, but he might as well have written about the courage to disappoint. The people who love the version of you that isn't really you, because that's what authenticity often requires. The willingness to let others be upset, confused, or even angry about your decision to stop being who they need you to be and start being who you actually are. This might be the hardest part of living your own life. Not the practical challenges of changing careers or relationships or cities, but the emotional challenge of watching people you care about struggle with your transformation. Some of them will feel betrayed, as if you've been lying to them all along. Others will feel threatened, as if your choice to live authentically somehow judges their choice to keep playing it safe. The truth that Nietzsche understood, that most people spend their entire lives avoiding, is that you cannot become yourself without outgrowing the identity that others have invested in. The good daughter, the reliable employee, the selfless partner, the strong one who never breaks down. These roles might have served you once, might have kept you safe and loved and needed, but they can also become prisons that keep you from discovering who you are when nobody needs anything from you. What you avoid suffering is exactly where your power lives. The discomfort you feel when you imagine disappointing someone, the anxiety that rises when you think about changing course, the fear that grips you when you consider living according to your own inner compass instead of everyone else's expectations. That discomfort isn't a warning sign. It's a treasure map pointing you toward the parts of yourself that you've kept locked away for so long that you've forgotten they contain your greatest gifts. The fear of transformation is really the fear of losing the identity you've built to be loved. But here's what Nietzsche knew that most people never learn. You cannot be truly loved for who you are until you have the courage to be who you are. All the love you've received for being what others needed is conditional love, dependent on your continued performance of a role that was never really yours to begin with. Living your own life doesn't mean becoming selfish or cruel or indifferent to others' feelings. It means becoming brave enough to let people love you for who you actually are instead of who you think they need you to be. It means trusting that the people who are meant to be in your life will stay, and that those who leave were never really seeing you anyway. Marina was 38 when her body started speaking a language she couldn't ignore. It began with her breath, the way it would catch in her throat during ordinary moments, making her feel like she was drowning in the middle of a conversation or suffocating while sitting at her desk. Then came the heart palpitations, the way her chest would suddenly feel too small for the organ beating inside it, as if her heart was trying to escape from something her mind refused to acknowledge. She had everything she was supposed to want. A husband who loved her in the way that good men love good women, with consistency and kindness and shared goals for their future. 2 children who were healthy and bright and growing into the kind of people she could be proud of. A career that provided both purpose and security. A house that was beautiful enough to host dinner parties, but comfortable enough to feel like home. Her life looked perfect from the outside, and most days she could convince herself that it felt perfect too. But the body doesn't lie, and Marina's body was telling her something her mind didn't want to hear. Every medical test came back normal. Her heart was healthy, her lungs were clear, her blood work was perfect. Stress, the doctor said. Maybe anxiety. Are you getting enough sleep? Exercise. Perhaps you should consider therapy, maybe some medication to help with the panic attacks. She tried everything they suggested. Yoga and meditation, therapy and medication, exercise routines and sleep hygiene. She read books about stress management and mindfulness, practiced gratitude and positive thinking. But nothing touched the feeling that was growing inside her like a living thing. The sense that she was slowly disappearing into a life that looked exactly like the one she was supposed to want. It took 3 years of symptoms before she could finally say the words out loud in a therapist's office. I don't think I chose this life. I think I just obeyed. The admission felt like a betrayal of everyone who loved her, everyone who depended on her, everyone who saw her as the woman who had it all figured out. But it also felt like the first true thing she had said about herself in decades. The marriage hadn't been wrong, just not hers. The children were everything to her, but the way she was mothering them was a performance of what good mothers do, rather than an expression of who she was as a person. The career was successful by every measure except the one that mattered. It had nothing to do with what made her feel alive. Even her friendships were built around the person she had become to fit in rather than the person she was underneath all that fitting in. Leaving wasn't about anger or disappointment with what she had. It was about a desperate need to breathe, to find out who she was when she wasn't being who everyone needed her to be. The divorce cost her friendships, financial security, social status, and a comfortable identity she had built over 2 decades of being the woman who did everything right. But it gave her something she hadn't realized she had lost: the ability to feel, to wake up curious instead of obligated, to make choices that came from inside her instead of outside pressures, to be disappointed and excited and uncertain and fully, completely alive in ways that her perfect life had never allowed. The symptoms disappeared almost immediately. Not because her life became easier, but because she stopped living someone else's life and started living her own. The life you're not living isn't somewhere else. It's not in a different city or a different relationship or a different career, though it might include all of those things. It's not in the future, waiting for you to become ready or worthy or brave enough to claim it. It's here now, in this moment, in the space between who you've been and who you're becoming, in the breath you're taking right now while you listen. To these words, it lives in the small rebellions against the voice in your head that says you should be grateful for what you have, that you shouldn't want more, that you shouldn't question a life that looks good from the outside. It lives in the moments when you catch yourself feeling genuinely excited about something and don't immediately talk yourself out of it because it seems impractical or selfish or unrealistic. The life you're not living speaks to you in the books that make you cry, the conversations that light you up, the dreams that visit you just before you fall asleep and just after you wake up, before your rational mind has a chance to dismiss them as impossible. It whispers to you in the envy you feel when you see someone else living boldly, not because you want their specific life, but because you want to feel that alive, that authentic, that unapologetically themselves. You don't need anyone's permission to start living your own life. You don't need a dramatic transformation or a complete upheaval or a perfect plan. You just need to start paying attention to what's real for you instead of what's expected of you. You need to start making small choices based on what brings you alive instead of what keeps you safe. What makes you feel authentic instead of what makes you acceptable. The symptoms you've been experiencing, the restlessness and the emptiness, and the sense that something is missing. They're not problems to be solved. They're invitations to remember who you are underneath all the roles you've learned to play. Your dissatisfaction isn't ingratitude. It's your soul calling you home to yourself. Your depression might not be a chemical imbalance. It might be a spiritual emergency, your psyche's way of telling you that you can't keep living as someone you're not. Your anxiety might not be a disorder. It might be your body's wisdom, alerting you to the fact that you're living in a way that doesn't align with your truth. Your insomnia might not be about sleep hygiene. It might be about the way you've learned to sleep through your own life. The life you're not living has been patient, but it won't wait forever. Every day you postpone the conversation with yourself about who you really are and what you really want is another day that the real you spends in exile. Another day that your authentic gifts remain locked away from a world that needs them. But today can be different. Today you can start listening to the whisper that's been trying to get your attention for so long. Today you can start honoring the part of you that knows there's more to life than going through the motions. More to existence than survival. More to you than the role you've been playing for everyone else's comfort. The life you're not living is the life where you remember that you were born to be yourself, not a carefully constructed version of yourself designed to make other people comfortable. It's the life where you trust your own experience instead of everyone else's opinions about what your experience should be. It's the life where you choose truth over comfort, authenticity over approval, your own voice over the chorus of voices, telling you who you should be. That life is here. It's now. It's yours. And it's been waiting for you to come home to yourself all along. The only question left is, are you ready to answer the call? If something in these words has stirred something in you, if you recognize your own story in what we've shared today, don't let this moment pass without acknowledging it. Leave a comment, not because you have to, but because sometimes the first step toward living your own life is simply saying, "This is me," in a place where others might understand. Your unlived life isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. And it's time to stop treating it like an option. And if you find yourself wanting more conversations like this one, more reminders that you're not alone in this journey of becoming who you really are, I invite you to subscribe. Not because you need another notification in your life, but because sometimes we all need a voice that reminds us that authenticity is possible, that living your own life isn't selfish. It's essential. Share this with someone who might need to hear it. Not to fix them or change them, but to let them know that if they're feeling like a stranger in their own life, they're not crazy. They're just ready to come home to themselves. Until we meet again in this space of truth and transformation, remember, the life you're not living is waiting. And so are we.